Well, now let's take you to whether the Labor Party has a secret agenda to raise other taxes, perhaps seen in its plan to tax unrealised capital gains for people with more than $3 million in their superannuation fund. Let's pick up some of the interview between the Prime Minister and the political editor, Andrew Bragg, again today.
I want to ask now about your super tax, the tax on unrealised gains. People involved in startups say this will gravely impact on investment. It will lead to people being taxed on money they don't even have. It's not indexed. So you and I have discussed the price of housing before. $3 million in 20 years might be $300,000 now, effectively. Do you accept, as the Parliamentary Budget Office does, that this will raise $4 billion a year within 4 years and $7 billion within 10 years? Why are you seeking to hurt people who have invested with their super?
Let's be very clear here, Andrew. If there are 200 people watching this program, or for every 200, if it's an average across the Australian population, then one of those 200 will be impacted. Just 0.5% of people. This is a modest change in which people. It is a modest change in which people who are already getting a considerable benefit, a concession if you like, will still get a concession. It will just be less than they're getting at the moment.
Now, the legislation for that tax became stuck in the Senate before the election was called. Senator Andrew Bragg from the Liberals was part of the committee last year that looked into the bill, and he ended up writing the dissenting report. And I spoke with him a little earlier.
I think Australians are starting to understand the real risk that if the Labor government is returned with the Greens, then you could see an expansion of the unrealised gains concept to other assets, including the family home. And what that means is that people would have to pay taxes on illiquid assets where they haven't got the actual cash.
So we saw in the United States that the Democrats had this sort of an idea under Joe Biden, and really they had to walk it back very, very rapidly. Do you get the sense that that would happen here, or is this the thin end of the wedge, what they're trying to do with larger super funds with more than $3 million in them?
No, I don't think they can, Ross, because they've put it in their budget. It's banked billions of dollars in the budget under the revenue item for this new unrealised gains tax. And so that means that if Labor is returned, they will have to do a deal with the Greens to get the revenue. Now, the Greens' policies are crazy. Their policies are about expanding unrealised gains to other assets, lowering the threshold and the like. And so this is a real risk to all Australians, because this unrealised gains tax concept means that anything is potentially up for grabs.
So we heard yesterday Jeff Wilson, who's been publicly against this policy, saying that he thinks that a company such as Canva, now worth, potentially hundreds of billions of dollars, would not have existed if this was in place. Is that the stark reality, that it curbs entrepreneurialism in Australia?
It will destroy new ideas. It will destroy innovation, because in a lumpy year, you might have a paper gain, but in the next year, you might have a paper loss. You've got to pay the tax on the paper gain, but you don't get any refund back on the loss. And that's why taxes are paid on profit, on assets which are realised, and that is a very sound principle of accounting going back many centuries. So unfortunately for Australia, this is already baked into the federal budget. So if Labor is returned, they will have to expand this, because they need to actually make good on their rubbery figures in their budget.
So I'm just trying to get my head around that, because that's one bit that I'd kind of missed, and that was that though I might pay tax on gains, non-realised gains this year, what you're saying is if I lose money next year, I don't get the cash back that I've paid to the tax office.
That's the insanity, Ross, that you would have to pay a tax on a paper gain, but if you made a paper loss, then you're on your own, which is why this is such an insane and risky idea. And frankly, people who have farms or properties or anything else which is illiquid without a cash flow should be very, very worried, because the government will be coming for your money if you make paper gains, which may only be illusory or only there for a very short period of time.
So there's one other aspect of this. A lot of things that people invest in, be it startup companies, be it farmland, whatever it might be, in their super fund, or that they invest in their own right, those things don't generate a lot of cash. So there's not a lot of cash around from income to pay these taxes if the assets rise in price. And some assets, small startup businesses especially, they rise very rapidly in price, but they might rise too fast for the person's cash ability to pay those taxes.
And so many Australians would be able to relate to being asset rich and cash poor, and that is just a natural extension of what would happen here if you had a tax on unrealised gains. So ultimately, that's why we're against it, because we think that you only tax on profits where actual gains are made. And the real risk of this election on Saturday is a Labor Greens government where the unrealised gains concept will be locked in forever, but it will also be massively expanded to other assets, including the family home.
So I've got one thing, leaving the family home aside as to whether it gets to that or not. And I would doubt that the public would ever go for that. But let's go to the point that if you, say, for example, have a small business or a bit of farmland, you just can't sell off a corner of it. You can't sell off sometimes a bit of a small business because there's nothing to sell. There's nobody to buy a little bit of that.
Well, you'd be forced to sell the whole asset in totality. And for farmers that are holding their farms in their self-managed super funds, they will be facing the prospect of having to sell a family farm just to pay a tax bill, which may only be there because there's a illusory or a short-term gain in one particular financial year, which has been erased the next year in a drought or a flood.
Just incredible stuff. Senator Andrew Bragg, good to have you on the program today.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks very much.